Welcome back. This is Josh.
And this is Matt.
And this is the Call to the Brewman's Bottle.
The Call to the Brewman's Bottle.
So here we are again, another late night recording. A little bit delayed this week. We got a lot done this week, though. There's a lot to announce. I know I'm really proud of the work that we've been putting in. And it's just good to sit down with you, even though it's Friday night. Or is it Thursday night?
It's Thursday night.
Even though it's Thursday night and we want to normally have the podcast posted by now, I think our announcements will really just kind of make all that a whole lot better. We have run into a guy at this new job that me and Matt have who's been offering us a whole lot of help in getting all of the website work done and really helping us wrap our heads around what it means to have a RSS feed on a website and to keep it updated. So shout out to Max Trinkle for really just giving us a big hand on this. It's a real exciting time for us, and it's just been a whole lot of fun from episode 1 all the way to episode 13 that we're sitting down and recording right now. From going from the episode that I completely forgot to equal out all the levels in, and you can hear me rolling away from the microphone, all the way to the point that we were covering E3 and getting a whole hour in and not even being able to cover every single topic. It's been so much fun just getting comfortable, sitting down and having a conversation behind the microphone with you guys and with Matt about all of our favorite things. And we just want to help everybody get as close to the nerd experience of gaming and pop culture when it comes to the movies that are coming out and the books that we all enjoy reading and so on and so forth, that I can't stress enough how much it means to me to be a part of just bringing all that makes my life enjoyable to your guys' life. And the more people we can get, the better it's going to get. So without any more rambling along, we finally gotten all the work done, and you can get on iTunes and download our podcast straight to your phone. You don't have to go to YouTube anymore, although we are still going to keep the YouTube updated, so we would really appreciate if anybody wants to continue in that avenue. Keep on going with that. But now we're on iTunes, and that was a huge milestone for us from the start to now, and we're just real excited to give you guys that ease of access to what we're doing here so that we can get more people listening and involved with the call every week and just moving forward into all of the goals that we've had set from the beginning.
The fact that we're on iTunes is really paramount to me, and I know it's paramount to you, Josh. I know it was a goal that was just a dream for us months and months ago, and now that we're actually on, it's going to be easier access for everyone. We're going to get probably even a bigger fandom because of this, with all the ease that comes with using iTunes itself, and not having to keep a video up for a whole hour. I'm also really excited the fact that as we progress through these episodes, the idea of having a guest on is going to be really entertaining, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. We have a couple of people lined up that we think will be the first candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, like I said in previous episodes, it's just going to add that extra avenue of enjoyment and comfortability that comes with doing this podcast.
Definitely. And it's also going to allow us to have more of the super focused episodes. When we're just breaking down something and really going deep into the stuff that we enjoy. The people that we've talked about bringing on have talked about the fact that they have a few of the topics that we hit each week that they really want to talk about with us. So when we sit down and we have that conversation with the people that we have planned, you know, it'll be more focused episodes. Like one of the people that we have planned to come on, we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons mostly, and we're going to really dig into the fact that our friendship with this fellow has a lot to do with our enjoyment of playing the tabletop game together. On top of going into the gaming and everything with our guests, we're also going to try to get into, I know that we've got some hardware upgrades that we've made. We've moved all of the recording of the podcast onto a MacBook that was donated to us. And so we're going to be learning how to do that. But one of the really cool things about having that is we're going to be mobile, and we go to a lot of LARP events and a lot of conventions, and we want to take the recording of the podcast to those types of people as well, and bring on LARPers and things that are LARPers and people who really have influenced us on our journey of becoming involved with the foam fighting atmosphere around the country, and that we feel once you guys get a chance to hear some of these people talk with us and have some of the conversations that we've already had that we know are really just what makes this game that we call Dagger here something really special to us, and we want to bring that to you guys so that you can listen to it as well.
And for all the cosplayers and LARPers out there that actually listen to this will also bring in different perspectives on how everyone views the actual LARP atmosphere since the 70s or 80s, and what it has become now, and different outlooks from cosplayers that can give us quick tips and easier ways to making really badass looking props.
Right on. Without going any further into that, I just want to say to you guys, if you would like to go to iTunes and look at the podcast and keep up with us that way and get involved in all the things that we're wanting to do, we welcome you to search the Call to the Brewman's Bottle on iTunes. If you just search it right in there, we'll pop right up. Look for our little mug logo with the dice on it, and just subscribe and start listening, and we'll keep it updated. I can't guarantee on any of the days that any of that's going to happen, because I'll admit this is all really new to me, from functioning on a MacBook to having something on iTunes in the first place.
And as we breathe life into this podcast, it's going to grow in sporadic ways. And that's why, part of the experience is actually holding on to our britches and writing out what it means to create something, and not only let it flow through us, but let it evolve through the listeners as well.
Absolutely. So as we continue putting out episodes, just expect content weekly from us. We will have at least one point each week where we sit down behind the microphones and we break down what it is that we're getting into that's keeping us entertained in our everyday lives. So moving on into some of the things that we wanted to talk about this week that's really been just our video game fixes. We've been diving into some comic books lately. I know our local comic book store moved locations, and their new location is absolutely fantastic. And so we've really been diving into the comic book selection up there with their new layout and the ease of access to what's going on. But to start things off, I wanted to go in and talk about how the announcement of Fallout 4 and everything that's going to be coming out with that spurred my interest in the fact that I owned Fallout New Vegas and I hadn't beaten it. And so I sat down and I talked with Matt a little bit, and I was like, man, you really think I ought to install this game and play it? And he goes, I can't believe you haven't done that the entire time you've had it. So I sat down and I came up with the concept of a character that I wanted to bring through the Fallout world, and I started doing it. And I have to say, New Vegas is definitely a fun game. I've been having a whole lot of a good time with it and all the different avenues that it lets you go in versus what the other Fallout games have been. And it's just a really good addition to all of those games. But I'll say that I have just as many disappointments in the game as I do really big praises for the game. I grow tired of the VAT system in Fallout New Vegas very, very quickly. And the crafting system seems very lackluster as far as I can tell, but maybe it's just so extensive that I'm not fully understanding it. But in the end, I'm sitting down and having a great time playing this Fallout New Vegas game, and the way that I have built my character, am just enjoying the way that you can play with the world that you're running around in.
New Vegas was a great concept in its own right, in the fact that instead of being in the outskirts of Washington, D.C., and having this urban sprawl, you have more of a desert western post-apocalyptic, which gives rise to completely different outlooks on social interaction within the game, and also outfits, weapons that you would use, and different points of power that would rise up in this region.
One thing that I noticed that was really, really different about New Vegas from Fallout 3 in particular was the fact that you don't start out as a vault dweller. And that threw me a whole lot, just in the fact that I'm used to being that. I'm used to coming out of a vault and doing that whole experience that way. And I have to say that expecting it in Fallout 4, I'm really glad. There's a certain level of involvement in being somebody that was in a vault, coming out into the world and experiencing it for the first time. Whereas in New Vegas, it's more of this gritty Western style storyline that I can appreciate definitely for what it is, but it didn't scream Fallout to me. And I have to say that I really have abandoned the main storyline. I went and searched for the Brotherhood of Steel because I love the energy rifles and things like that within the game. And I have to say, when it comes to the plethora of weapons within New Vegas, that is a lot of fun. There's a lot of weapons that already exist that are really neat. And when you pick them up and you get them out in the open world, it just makes everything that much more interesting. And, you know, I have to say that, like I said in the beginning, there are some things that bother me, like the fact that after I use VATS for, I would say, an hour of gameplay, I start looking for other ways to fight things. I grow kind of bored of it.
I've had a lot of people tell me, and have read a lot of different reviews on how there was a big push to not even have VATS in Fallout 4 from the fans because of exactly what you said. It pigeonholed them into almost requiring to use the thing day and night.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you're not really a sneak character and you don't want to use melee or VATS, you're just kind of the sniper. I felt like the gunslinger absolutely had to use VATS, and I moved away from it really quickly in the beginning. Because you remember when I first sat down to play the game, I said, I want to play through this main storyline. I'm going to make a character that uses pistols and is going to go through the whole deal. And it didn't take long at all for me to go to say, you know, well, I want to see what's going on with the Brotherhood of Steel in New Vegas, you know, and completely abandoned it. But I will say that it's an extremely interesting experience. I am going to go back to the main storyline. But the character that I've made is really entertaining me because I'm doing the melee, which isn't something I've ever done in Fallout before. I'm always a gunslinger of sorts, but I've gone with pistols a little bit, but I've moved completely toward melee. And then I went with the Brotherhood of Steel, and they give you access to energy weapons you just can't say no to. So I'm doing that, and I'm going to go back to the main storyline, and I'm really interested to see how my decisions having become a Brotherhood of Steel will affect me, because the way the factions work in Fallout New Vegas seems immense. You're doing all of these things. I remember you were sitting with me when I ran into the Legion for the first time, and I said, I have to kill these people for what they've just done in front of me. And so I did, and it wasn't easy, but I killed them. And now everywhere I go, periodically, I'm getting Legion assassins sent at me, and that's a whole lot of fun. And it's just everything I love the Bethesda games for.
To give you a glimmer of hope, I know that maybe the main storyline doesn't seem like it's very Fallout-esque, but without ruining anything, understand that the later missions and the ending are still in line with the Vault story and the actual war itself.
Well, I did run into some Vault dwellers that definitely gave me a lot of entertainment from that angle that filled in that gap a little bit for me. And then doing the Brotherhood of Steel quests is awesome. I really think they did a fantastic job with the Brotherhood in this one. Although, because I'm a fan of the Brotherhood of Steel and the way that they pursue technology and so on, I wish they were a little bit more involved. But maybe I'll find out moving forward that because I decided to do those quests so early on in the main story, they end up being more involved. But that's just speculation on my end. I'm about 20 hours into the game, but I do a lot of running around and completionist thought process, so don't think that if I'm taking too long or longer than maybe you have, it's just the way I do. But I noticed that you had picked up a game that I had played through when it first came out because I'm a huge fan of the series. But I want to know how you felt about your playthrough of BioShock Infinite.
Well, it's been sitting on my computer for 6 months, which is a problem.
That is a problem, and we addressed it.
And because it was addressed, I decided to pick it up. Now, I was a real big BioShock 1 fan. I really dig the storyline, and I understand the perspective that they're coming from. Now, when you had to go back to Rapture as a actual Big Daddy, it wasn't really what I was looking for, and it kind of really turned me off, to be honest. Now, BioShock Infinite. Basically, the storyline, I don't want to ruin anything, but I am going to butter it up. It's 1912. Your name is Booker DeWitt, if you haven't played it. You're an ex-agent that does some dirty work, and basically you're sent up into the sky. And this is when you run into your main villain, Comstock, this southern preacher that likes to mix propaganda with the teachings that he has. And it's really breathtaking for him to be such an evil guy, but to be so coercive and to have so much character as the main villain.
I think that's kind of a staple in BioShock, don't you? That the main guys are these real charismatic leaders.
Like I said, I don't really want to ruin anything because it definitely brings all the games together. But yes, there is always a man, and he is always very convincing to lead these people deep underwater or above the clouds. So basically, I really want to touch some points on this game when it comes to the companion. In most first-person shooters, your companion always gets in the way, or they die, or they're just an obstacle, just like the enemies are. And in BioShock Infinite, you don't really get that. Elizabeth not only plays off of your character and how real human emotions would really impact you, but she also does stuff seamlessly, from unlocking doors or unlocking chests to moving out of your way when there's combat, to summoning stuff into the game from her temporal rifts that she has, her beautiful powers. Like I said, I won't go far into it, but... And I really like that because in first-person shooters, that always irritates me, because when I take on a companion, and like you said when you were playing last week on Fallout, that you didn't really want a companion, you want to do it yourself, they are baggage.
Yeah, in most of the games that you play that are first-person, exactly like you're saying, they are much more of a burden than a help. I would have to agree that in BioShock Infinite, it feels much more like your companion is a utility than a true companion. But she's there throughout the story, keeping you really, I would say, emotionally involved in what's going on.
Very emotionally involved. Yeah. And since she's intertwined with you and you are intertwined with the main story, all the pieces kind of fall together. I also really like in this BioShock that in the earlier ones, it was based off of social status, within greed, within how much stuff you owned, how much plastic surgery you could afford, or maybe magic that you could afford.
Right.
And it definitely gave the hierarchy when it came to Andrew Ryan's city. But in Comstock City, it's very racial. And because of this, everything is based off of cheap tricks and separating social status when it comes to color of your skin or where you came from originally.
Right.
And since the city is set up on different islands that float around with anti-gravity, it gives you a beautiful social structure where they can introduce really gritty artwork and the dark story that always comes with BioShock. Even from the signs to the way people interact with you, and eventually when you pick your enemies and allies and how that actually turns out, it just all breathes life into this burdening story from the main character and how much he doesn't realize how important he is to everything.
Right. Now, moving on a little bit from the story, because you don't want to go too deep into all of that and ruin it for someone that hasn't played. I want to know how you felt about the way that you run and gun in this particular game.
Okay, I really like how you can use magic and shoot at the same time.
It's such a seamless environment to play with, is it not?
Well, in the other ones, I really liked how much work they put into the magic, and they didn't let down in this one, like you said. I really like how it does interact with the environment, how enemies are smarter in this one, and they'll come from different directions with different perspectives on how to try to kill you.
Right.
And not to mention the skyline. The skyline in the game is really interactive with combat and out of combat, because you can just jump. And by the way, a skyline is a huge metal guardrail that runs through all of these islands that connect them, and it's a fast way of someone individually traveling. So you can just jump on these skylines, and it's multi-level, and multi-tiered islands where you can jump, you can speed up, or you can slow down, and you can attack enemies, and they'll even get on and try to attack you as well. They might try to chase you down the skyline, or you might get on opposing skylines, and you're rushing past each other while they're trying to kill you. It gives a lot of life to combat, and like in the old ones with Big Daddies, these new Big Daddies, or what I like to call handymen, are very destructive. When it comes to attacking a Big Daddy in the old Bioshocks, you could just sight them down and you could kill them if you were strong enough. The handymen in this one, they'll get on the guardrails, they'll shock them to knock you off, they'll jump at great lengths to attack you, they'll pick even their own men up and use them as weapons to kill you. So they're very destructive and can kill you real quick, which is great for this game because it's always balls against the wall with this first-person shooter, and they definitely deliver that.
Yeah, I felt like the addition of the skyline definitely added a whole new level of speed and fluidity to the way that you fight in the BioShock games. And I also agree with what you're talking about the handymen. I felt like going through and fighting the different Big Daddies in the other BioShocks, it was really, really fun, and I felt like BioShock had that real big enemy down, the insurmountable boss type thing. Like when you round a corner and you see one, you tighten up and it's go time. You know, these guys really add that level to it. And I'll say that in the very last fight, when you're fighting a certain huge amount of those handymen, it really gives a whole new level of just having your max out character with all your chosen guns and whatever powers you've decided to give him, and you're just throwing it at this world and doing everything that you can. And it was really fun to look at. It was a whole lot of fun to play, and I'm glad that you took it and beat it. How many hours did it take you to beat it? I'm curious.
I mean, it's a 15-hour game, 15 to 18. So I think all in all, it took me like 25 because I did it on a harder difficulty, and because of that, I had scarcer resources, which caused me to die a lot in some spots. It caused me to choose different angles on how I was going to attack because it's like in Rapture, it's really constricted. You're fighting in real close hallways, or you're fighting in buildings that have a lot of stuff. In this one, it's very open mausoleum style buildings or open skyline areas, which causes the enemies to have as many angles as you do.
Right. And one of the cool things about the skyline system, you were talking about how it's taking you up and down these floating islands. I'm sure you had to find a whole lot more secrets, and it made some of the finding of those secrets really, really cool, where you're just skating around on this roller coaster style track and you see, oh, I can jump down over there, and you go and you pick up your little secret
Yeah, because
stuff.
you can leave the skyline at any time, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And when it comes to secret stuff, one thing that they really focused on with your supplies and the different arsenal that you have is lockpicks are real important. If you have lockpicks, you can go anywhere. If you don't have lockpicks, you might not get a lot of the bonuses or the vitality improvements that you can find.
Right.
But overall, it was good, and I don't want to ruin the ending for you guys, but it made me tear up. And if they ended the series at this point, I would be perfectly happy with it because they definitely completed a story that was worth telling.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. Definitely. Feel the same way, except that I want to play more BioShock games.
So moving on from the two games that probably most of our crowd have already played, let's talk about a game that you had mentioned way back in one of the first podcasts, Josh, and you really wanted to break down an old school class and your perspectives on the actual development of how these characters go. Why don't you jump into a little EverQuest for us?
Well, I know I mentioned in the last episode that I wanted to talk a little bit more about it because of its nostalgic place in my heart. So when we were talking about what we might want to talk about on this week's episode of the podcast, I definitely wanted to go into it a little more because now it's a little bit lesser known of what EverQuest really was or what it still is on the emulator server that I play on, and I'll stand by that they have hit the mark and brought the game back for me. But I just wanted to tell everybody a little bit about what it is that made me fall in love with this really old, almost boring at times game. So in the beginning of MMOs, it wasn't all about the PvP, and it wasn't all about a lot of the big staples, maybe player housing or trade skills or raiding and this and that and the other. EverQuest wasn't a game that was so much about all of the things that MMOs are about today. And in the beginning of the atmosphere, MMOs were games that were about meeting people in a fantasy world that you would never ever have a chance to meet before or again anywhere else, and building relationships between these characters that you have. And so in the beginning, MMOs had extensive races and classes to choose from a lot of times. And while your customization might not have been a whole bunch on how your character might look or whatever, your ability to create something that you wanted to play was a lot bigger. And so you were telling me about how when you would first try to look into EverQuest, how you would try to maybe bridge the gap between a class that you had played in another game. And that's something that you really kind of have to leave behind. You have to understand that a lot of games in the modern day have condensed what was in the past into what it is now. So one class in an MMO today is really in old EverQuest. That type of a class was broken down into maybe 2 to 4 other classes within EverQuest. So I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail about what it is that I'm doing on EverQuest right now. And right now I'm playing a wizard, which is really fun because a wizard has to participate in groups in the beginning. You have to go out and find people to group with. And in a game like EverQuest, there's not the quest hubs where you're going out and collecting adventures from people. There's zones that you have to go out and adventure in, and you just kill for your experience. There are quests that you can go and turn in back in most of the main cities. There's at least one for the beginning, but that's not what the game was all about. The game is about going out and putting yourself against monsters that you can't kill alone, and the community formed around that. And so you ended up having people who would get together and play for extended periods of time and really get to know each other and get to know the community within the game. And I remember as a kid seeing people in the game that were almost famous to me because of the fact that they had built a name for themselves as being good at what they did. But anyways, my character in EverQuest right now is a wizard. And one of the cool things about EverQuest versus the modern MMO is that in the beginning they hadn't really figured out that inconveniencing your player was going to be a thing of the past. That a lot of the new games try to make it as easy to get in and do the game as possible. But as a wizard, you started out with just 2 spells and you're having to fill a spell book almost like old school D&D. And I'm sure that's exactly where the developers got a lot of the ways that their spells functioned. But you're going through, and as you gain levels in this game, you have to go back and talk to your trainers in your home city, or go to another city where they won't kill you for showing up if you're evil or whatever, and buy your spells and build your spell book to do what you do. And these spells cost money in the game, and it's really difficult to get every single spell for your class at the level that you're supposed to get it, because of how difficult it can be to make money in EverQuest without just grinding out a lot of needed items such as bone chips or something like that. So my wizard's up to about level 15 now. And so I've got quite a few spells in my spell book. I'm getting to the point that you can see that wizard, just like in your thought process of what the elemental magic dealer would be, is the damage dealer. I'm starting to see that happen. And in a game like EverQuest, it takes about 15 levels to really see your class start to take form. But I feel like that causes you to grow more attached to your class really as you're playing it, because you're building it into something that's becoming so much more fun to play. So at around level 15, you start going into the first zones where there are multiple groups to choose from a lot of times. And this is one of the crazy things about the fact that what I'm talking about here, Matt, is an emulator server. This isn't a live server from a real big game developer. You know, this is a privately done emulator of the game, which I think just very recently has gone from being, I mean, really borderline illegal. And so these are people who have actually put the time in to rebuild this community from the source files in this game and make something that we can play in. And so I'm at level 15 on this wizard. I'm doing all the things from my childhood that honestly, man, I can't fathom how I even stayed alive for 10 minutes in EverQuest as a 10-year-old kid. But I'm getting involved in these groups, and I'm realizing that there are just as many people out there that used to enjoy EverQuest for the exact same reasons that I did, and they want to get back involved with it too. So almost any time during your peak gaming hours in the afternoon, you can see around 1,000 to 1,200 people on this emulator server, and a crowded EverQuest server is 2,000 people. And to me, it's just amazing that they've built this community of regular players, of people who just want to go back and play this game again. And I can suggest to anybody who really thinks that they can put their nose to the grind and just sit down for hours and play a game for the sake of playing it, you'll find that EverQuest, while it might not always be entertaining, it is always rewarding in the end. And you're participating in a community that honestly won't let you down. A lot of the people that are on this game, that are going to play this game with you, they have common interests and goals within what they're doing. And there's a whole lot less of the tiresome player that is in the modern MMO that I've found. And there's a lot less of this standalone attitude of I'm just playing the game to play with myself. And it's one of those games where when you log on, you've got to be ready to start talking to people and getting involved, or you're going to have a real slow go about it. But I just can't stress enough how much fun it is and how awesome it is to be trying to... I'm playing a class I've never played before in the Wizard, and doing a role in the game that I never truly understood as a kid. And another thing, and the last thing that I'll talk about with the Wizard before I just move on from this, is the fact that EverQuest was such a big game, and they took travel so seriously that as my Wizard gets higher level, teleporting people around the world is a really, really needed commodity. And so a Wizard becomes an integral part of the community of the game in getting people where they want to go. And then at the max level in the end, you can't go to a whole lot of the raid zones at all if you don't have a wizard to take you there and teleport you there.
I really like how they kind of shadowed that in WoW. How serious it was in an old game like that, and how it's almost black and white with certain decisions because of its era of development. I remember WoW at one point, mages were really, really important for travel, and they also made almost a living off selling portals alone to people. People that couldn't get to certain areas or people that wanted to go ahead and get there without having to make the travel. A mage could meet up and say, hey, I've already got this portal. Everyone go ahead and jump through.
Yeah. Just imagine that without the flight pass, that's the only way that you can travel places, and that's what the old EverQuest wizard was. And there's also druids that do it, and they can take you to different zones. I mean, it's just so intricate that you could probably sit down and have a podcast just about the intricacies of what it is that a real hardcore EverQuest player does every day.
So moving on from virtual gaming, let's go ahead and zoom in on the tabletop. I know I had a blast running this as a DM, and it being 5th edition, the siege fighting was really intriguing me, and it definitely didn't let you guys down either. Can you give me a player's breakdown of what it was like to siege through the night against these orcs?
Yeah, man. I'm just going to say first and foremost, I was at the comic book store just the other day singing the praises of 5th edition D&D, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do it yet again. 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is impressive, to say the very least. It's one of the most fun tabletop D20 RPGs I've ever played in my life, and I've tried quite a few of them. This siege combat, we referenced it when we've talked about our Dungeons & Dragons campaign before on the podcast, that we were looking forward to doing it. It was spectacular. And from the player's perspective, I know that you made some decisions as the DM on how the siege was going to run that I have to say were top notch. The best way that we could have done it to have the best time. First and foremost, I want to mention the fact that we talked about how we had a certain amount of time to set up these defenses at the end of the last podcast, and then we see these orcs with this giant bell that they're ringing coming over the hill to assault us. Well, when we started the session, we divvied up all the defenders of the town in groups to each member of the party. I myself got the farmhands, Kyle got the sword knights, Cody got the blacksmiths, and the elite class ranger guy, which neither of us have really been impressed with the ranger, but I'm going to go ahead and say, seeing it in action, if that particular elf was the ranger class in action,
he's actually a dumbed down version.
It's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and backtrack and say that while the ranger might not have seemed too much fun to play to me, in action, when they're fighting, when it's time to draw swords and shoot folk, they do the job, and they do it really, really well. Hunter's Mark being made into a spell instead of just a class ability really isn't a bit. I don't like that a whole lot, but we're not going into a Ranger expose right now. Cody got the Ranger. The Ranger was really awesome. So when the siege starts, we all roll for initiative and see how things are going to go that way. And then on each of our initiative steps, all of our group goes. And so we basically trade back and forth in this siege on rounds. It's like there's a player round, a defender round, and then there's an attacker round. And when everything started, we didn't really have very good sight or anything. So having multiple people making multiple checks changed everything about having 3 people playing a session where we were about to fight 50 orcs.
What was it like for the book to basically give you the action of the hero? And what I mean by that is, just a reiteration, you said that you were able to take control of these NPCs, but the book displays it as this heroic thing, as these people are simpletons, even to you, and they they take on your word and you control them and you're the commander, even though you've never really been a commander before. They see you as this pinnacle of a hero, and they listen to your every whim.
Right. I thought that was really interesting on multiple levels. It was definitely fun for somebody like me to play with, enjoying the leadership role in general in Dungeons and Dragons. But I'll say one of the things that really stood out about that particular element to me was your ability as a DM to basically look at us and say, well, the farmhand tries to do that, but then this happens. Or, yeah, that's exactly what that farmhand would want to do, so he does it, and he does it like that. I felt like it was a level of immersion that made me feel like my character was the epic hero that your characters are supposed to be growing into in D&D, and I felt like it was the right way to do it, whereas in 4th edition, it was quite obvious that they were trying to give you the heroic feel through your character's ability to manipulate the environment as a class rather than as an individual. Other than that, I would have to say that the attitude of the orcs in their assault of the keep, or the homestead that we were defending, was absolutely spectacular. I know that a lot of the monster manuals and stuff will give you guidelines on how orcs are supposed to act and so on and so forth. But when it comes down to the way the siege went down in waves, they had the initial force of fellas that didn't have any shields, and they were coming in because orcs don't care, and the ones seeking glory get there first. And it was a lot of fun, man. And just to give it a little bit of a breakdown like you had originally asked for, step by step, night 1 of the siege pretty much consisted of their idea of siegecraft. They ended up trying to dump tar down a hill at us and lighting it on fire, which I don't know why it resulted in just a fog, but I thought it would have exploded, but it just resulted in this weird, smoky, perception debilitating fog. And then through the fog come the first wave of just the Rakshamble skirmisher orcs just coming in, and they would hit our defenses and have to climb over the walls, and that would give us plenty of time as in my opinion, elite group of thug nasty killers to just take them out right in the first turn. And so our main problems, I think, in the initial part of the siege was the fact that we were unable to see a lot of things until they had jumped into the center of the courtyard, as well as the fact that when they would bring in like the bell, and the bell deafened everyone. And just to call back to what you had said about us giving commands, everyone that failed that particular Constitution save was deaf and could no longer receive verbal commands.
Right, which changed the battlefield a lot.
Exactly. You had to maintain sightline with the group of people that you were trying to command. I was broken from one of my men through the night because of that. I had to try to get to him and give him hand signals and so on.
I really like how they gave life to the orcs. They weren't just two-dimensional. This orc was really smart, and like you said, his coordinated attacks were very different. They used this pitch that they poured down the hill, and it just gave off this nasty smoke, and all of you were standing around like, okay, well, it's not burning any of the buildings down. What's going on? And then before you know it, these orcs that are real skinny and they've covered themselves in as many dark material as they can are slipping over the wall to try to knife you before anyone else shows up. And it really gave rise to a lot of intelligence with the actual greenskin that's running this charge. So it kind of gives a mystery. Of course, you met him later on, and I'm not going to ruin that. I don't want you to kind of give that. But it gave a lot of mystery to who is running this and why, how is this orc so smart? What have they done? Why do they have all these natural capabilities? And this is all happening within you trying to protect this small homestead.
Right. Just like you said, getting to where the leader got involved and everything, we ended up peeling off the things that were on the bell and bringing the bell inside and getting another 3-hour break in the waves of attacks to reinforce our defenses and everything.
Speaking of that, let's like back up. What was it like to place your own defenses on the map?
I would say that the defenses on the map, just like I said in the last podcast, man, I really feel like I had the right idea about it. once I knew what was going on with it. At first, we dug some trenches that worked out because it was a night fight. Had a couple of orcs fall in some 10-foot holes and break their legs. Also barricading the doors that we saw as potential breaches in security forced most of the orcs to have to jump over the walls and spend their entire movement action, bonus action, jumping over that wall. And then when they landed, they were just food for us. We made it all the way up into the first break because of those defenses with every single one of our men intact. We didn't lose a single life all the way up into the first break. And it was just after that, getting the chance to reinforce my defenses and create possibly some different defenses that we had time to put our heads together and come up with. We really knocked it out of the park the second time. Shout out to Kyle for deciding to come up with a completely new idea of a defense that you could put up in the midst of a siege that you wouldn't want up at the beginning of your siege, where when they would jump over the walls, they'd land on spikes and get hurt. I just when you talk about setting up your defenses and trying to wrap your head around how you would defend something that is not built to withstand a siege at all, they're doing. I really like how much
interaction that you have with the environment.
I was gonna say they give all the flavor to the player. They take, and I don't know how that affects your experience as a DM, really, because a lot of the flavor used to
It makes me feel like I'm playing, to be honest with
awesome. Because I mean, it just a lot of the flavor used to rest on the DM, where now the players have to add a little bit of that flavor, and that definitely also came from the rest of the people. But we ended up having some more defenses added and reinforcing the defenses we already did have, and then the big guns came out for both of us, I would say. The big orc ended up sending warg riders in, jumping over the walls, and we had to surround them and fight them, and they were scoring hits and hurting some folks. Our cleric came through, even though he was a storm cleric, healing people that needed to be healed, and understanding that the job of a cleric, whereas your specialization can lie in one area, the job of the cleric really doesn't change. And it's your job to be the glue between the cracks of the party.
And I think he does an excellent job. Not to mention him having the highest defense in the entire party definitely brings a lot of aggro on his side. But his ferociousness and the abilities that he have picked definitely coincide with each other.
Definitely. But we had two warg riders jump into the main courtyard and start wreaking some havoc as we see that the head orc is on his way down. Now, a lot of really crazy things have been going on at this point. The cleric has been defending the front gate. No one's made it through the front gate. I've been, as the wizard, I'm going to tell you, I was the most mobile wizard I think I've ever seen in a D&D campaign. Just jumping from building to building to building to building, just taking care of business that way. But in the second wave, we ended up deciding to bring the bell in and put it in front of a door, and when the wargs jumped in, said, let's wizard it up, and I focused on the bell, and we rang it, and ended up causing some of the orcs to be deafened, which I don't know exactly how that helped us in any way, but it was fun to just try. But an ogre ended up coming through and smashing through one of the doors, and we took him down before he even made it 2 full steps into the courtyard, really. But by the time that the main orc on the 2-headed warg jumps over the walls, we've got berserkers coming through a building that I'm having to abandon, and me and my farmhands have to leave. The sword knights make it in just in time and cut off the berserkers and kill them. And at the very end of the fight, when everything's being brought to a close, the big warg riders being killed, but these orcs are a little bit different and don't break when their leader dies. The ogre's been brought down by the paladin. The paladin brings a giant 2-handed axe down on that ogre's head and just takes him down. And this is a large 2-handed axe that he's picked up previously that we've discussed in other breakdowns of the D&D campaign. But as it's all going down, I end up having to surround one last berserker with my farm hands, and we bring him down. And I'm proud to say that we lasted the entire siege. We did not lose a single man. And just as it was getting to the point that we had one person with about 11 HP or 8 and another dude down to 4 HP, I ended up hearing a random knock, 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 just like somebody was knocking on your front door of your house on one of our barricades. And when I open the murder hole, there's 2 elves that hand me a war horn, and when I blow it, it summons elves on stags and white horses that come and just kill the rest of the orcs, and we make it through without losing a single man. And the session ended right there. I feel like every campaign needs the session where it's just full combat, full tilt for at least one night. All of us enjoy that session equally, I think. And the siege was just sprinkles on that Sunday when it comes to the full combat session. And I had an absolute blast, and it's renewed my vigor for the session now that Kyle's back from Ireland and we're getting back down to playing some real tabletop games and doing what we do with the noob session. Not to say not the noob session, but the introductory session that Kyle is running, as well as the more veteran 1 to 20 session that we're running. I'm real excited to be getting back down into these things. But I definitely wanted to touch on something before we come up to the end of this podcast, Matt. We have both had a renewed vigor in some comic books lately, and we've been going for long talks on these podcasts without touching on that. And I want to know, because I've seen your crate of comic books get more and more full. Yeah. I want to know what's going on, because I've only got 3. I've read 3. I've started them. I've got some back issues on order so I can catch up from issue 1.
Well, before I jump into these and hopefully not only give our listeners some interest, but you some interest, I want to hear, since you said it's renewed vigor, you've got this hankering to want to read comics now. The comics that you picked up, how did you like them, and what are they about?
Well, honest to goodness, man, I only picked up 2 for myself, and you gave me the other one. So the one that I'm going to start with it's called Baltimore: The Plague Ships. And I've only just begun what it is that this Baltimore character is with this version. But as I've looked into more of this specific comic, this is like a witch hunter / vampire hunter style guy that goes through different experiences slaying different monsters. So there's Baltimore, the Plague Ships, and then Baltimore, the Cursed Whatever. And I don't know all of the different subtitles that they have, but there's different instances where old Baltimore goes in and shows his badassery. So starting off with the Plague Ships, man, it's just a really dark, the vampire universe where the vampires are really at the peak of their civilization and mankind is at the lowest. They're ghouls running around at the behest of some of the vampires that are just insurmountable in some areas, and you've got this all wonderful that I love bald-headed witch hunter / warrior priest guy that's coming in with his guns and rapier and just killing them, and he's doing the best he can for what he can do. And this particular story in the Plague Ships starts off with him meeting a girl he doesn't want to come with her, and she's coming anyways, and I'm looking forward to continuing on in that comic. But the renewed vigor that I'm talking about is old glorious Conan. I've started 2 new Conans that I have not touched at all before, in Conan the Barbarian, the Dark Horse Comics, and Conan Red Sonja. Now, I didn't know anything about Conan Red Sonja, but it's just this girl that apparently Conan runs into that is the female version of Conan. And you know me, I love female main characters and female fantasy heroines. So as soon as I saw that 2 of my main favorite fantasy characters are coming together in a comic, that's my type of comic. Like, I don't really do superheroes all that much. I really like the high fantasy, and the comics that I'm into are definitely that. And I see that there's this Conan that is, it seems like it's written for me, and I start reading it, and it is fantastic. It's everything Conan that you want, but it's this girl doing Conan-esque shit too, and I love it. And then Conan the Barbarian is just a deeper story from the origin story. You know, everybody knows about Conan, how he got started, where his whole family gets killed and he gets taken off and becomes a big strong man that is one of the last Sumerians or whatever of his tribe, and goes out to be the strength of my own brow warrior hero that he is. It's just a story about him in the world that he's in doing Conan shit, and I'm loving it. So those are the comics that I've gotten into. I've got a couple of issues of Red Sonja coming, though I think that there's only 4. And then I've also got a couple of issues of the Conan the Barbarian, if I'm not mistaken, coming. But I was in there trying to talk to the guy, and he got me a little confused thinking I was talking about Conan the Avenger. But I'm talking about Conan the Barbarian, and I need to get some back issues on that because I like to start from the beginning. But I'm also really new to comics, so I'm just learning that you don't necessarily have to start from the beginning if you know a character is interesting to you. So what about you, Matt? That's my rant and raving on Conan that I love. What are the comics that have been grabbing you lately that you've wanted to talk about for so long?
So I'm not going to give you any superhero comics this time, which is kind of nice because we're going to delve into we're going to delve into some high fantasy. We're going to delve into sci-fi. Mm-hmm. The first one I want to mention that Sarah showed me that I am really, really hooked on, and it is it's a beautiful concept in itself. It's called Saga.
Now that's the one that our buddy Chris at the comic store that is running things up there, when we mentioned it, shouted across the room. Now that's a good one.
Yes, yeah. Apparently him owning the store, he's already up on issue 25 or 28 or whatever the issue is. I think I
saw
exactly.
28 was the last one that I saw.
So basically, this is like a high fantasy Star Wars, to put it the best way. You have these two people named Elena and Marco, and they come from 2 different planets. One of them is called Landfall, and it's the largest planet in their galaxy. And Marco comes from Wreath, which is the actual moon. And they hate each other. Landfall is very technologically based. It's got a social status that definitely bleeds in every facet of their being. And then you have Wreath, and all these people from Wreath are magic wielders. And since Wreath is the only satellite on Landfall, they cannot attack each other because a full war would throw the other one out of the orbit. So therefore, they have to outsource their entire war onto different planets without asking. They just strike onto a planet, or if they find out that insurgents are hiding on there, long story short, they will destroy the planet, destroying each other.
So they just basically look at each other and they're like, we can't have this. We're going to go to this planet and duke it out.
Yeah, we can't.
High noon,
we will not
motherfucker.
kill each other. We're going to have a victor, so we're just going to go across the galaxy. So Elena and Marco are from 2 different factions, and Marco is in jail. He's been imprisoned, and Elena is a security guard that's watching over him. Well, over the course of time, she falls in love with him, and they run away, and they have a child named Hazel. And Hazel is actually the narrator, which is really cool. Even from birth, Hazel begins the narration. This is how I'm born. This is the start. This is the beginning of the story. This is how everything becomes as it is. So when they get together and they run away, there's bounty hunters all over the galaxy, and they're all called specific names. Like, they're not just like Janice blah blah blah. It's the Will or the Stalk. And basically, the Stalk is a bounty hunter that comes after Elena and Marco that has been hired, and she is like a spider creature, and she has 6 appendages 6 or 8 that all wields pistols or knives or axes. So she's a very like high fantasy, but it's futuristic. You know, they're using spaceships and all this stuff. And then you have the Will, which is not working with the Stalk, but they're all after the same goal. And the Will has a sphinx type cat that follows him around, and it's a specific cat species called lion cat, and they're about the size of lions. And while the Will is walking around and he's doing his business and he's talking to people and interrogating people, the lion cat will not only pick up his lies but everyone else's. So he can never be told a lie. He will always get the truth.
Now you're into this one, huh?
Oh yeah, big time.
Oh, it sounds really awesome. Now, do you have issue number 1 of this one so I could like get started at the beginning?
Right now I have 1 through 18 at the house. These are all first issues that Sarah owns. You know, of course, you should try out 1 through 3. I don't think that I have 5 or 6. I think that's the 2 that I was missing that I actually had to get online and read. But other than that, all the other first issues are here in the box.
Awesome.
So if you ever wanted to pick that up, anyone else out there that wants to pick this up, remember it's called Saga. So to end this this rant that I have on it. So basically, they're hired to go after these people because if everyone on these planets finds out that they have had a child, that this might end the war, and for a lot of people, that's bad business.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. I don't want to ruin anything else. You know, there's a lot of different characters that are brought in. There's a race of robot people that are royal, like Prince Robot 4 or Royal Baron Robot the 32nd. And it's a little wacky with the way they look, but the artwork is stunning.
I was going to say the artwork has this weird, almost like like they understand that their characters are crazy, but they're still going to make it look really good.
Like normal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like they make it so, like normal, like you said. All right, so moving on from that, we got Birthright. And Birthright, I picked up the first 2 issues, I think either last week or the week before that. But Birthright is about these 2 brothers, Mikey and Brennan. And both of them are, like I said, they're brothers. And Mikey decides to run off into the woods in the first actual comic, and then Mikey is pulled into this fantasy world where this orc shaman tells him, you are going to grow up to be the defender and the savior of our world, and until then you're not going back. And I have to teach you. And alongside me is Rai, which is a half bird, half female assassin that hates him but has to train him as her code of conduct. So Mikey does all this stuff. He saves princesses, and he kills this evil energy king and all this stuff. But this all happens in the real world in only 2 years. So when Mikey comes back as this high fantasy Conan the Barbarian character that's whisked away maidens and punched dragons to death.
Is he older when he comes back?
Yeah, he's like in his late 20s, and Brennan is still 9.
Oh.
So Brennan's the older brother. So what you get is this mixture of emotion with how Brennan still feels like he's the older brother, but Mikey has already gone through his life, and he's gone through a really rough life, and he has to abide by the real rules of the real world. And that includes police, that includes putting his family members in danger. And so when Mikey gets back, he gets arrested, blah, blah, blah. And like I said, I'm not going to go too far into it. I want you guys to actually read this. It's called Birthright, by the way. Mikey finds out that some of these enemies from this fantasy world are ripping their way into the real world to get him. So even though he was raised to save another place, he now has to save the place that he was born in. It was his birthright, as they put it.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. And they really they hit home with that.
Yeah.
But I realize that we're coming up on the end of the podcast, so I'm going to cut it there. We'll talk about more comics in the next episode.
Yeah, let it be said that we did try to get to comics this time, and we've got more comics that we want to talk about, and as we keep going, we'll try to point you in those directions as well to find some of those really good little short books that we all love. But just like you said, we're really getting up to the end of everything here. So just the last thing that I want to tell you guys is hit us up on iTunes. Get up on there and hit the subscribe button. We put a lot of work into trying to get that up there, and we really hope that you guys can enjoy this a little bit more now that it's a little bit easier to get. So without anything more to say, this has been Josh.
And this is Matt.
And this has been the Call to the Brewman's Bottle.